This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, Turkish dissident faces 10 years in prison. Will you take a stand for Jinan Kaftancioglu? With us this evening, Kursat Christoff Pekgoz, a human rights activist. Kursat, thank you so much for joining the Glazov Gang.
Thank you so much, Jamie, for having me.
Kursat, why don't we begin with you telling us about Jinan and the petition you've started for her?
Sure. So Jinan is a dissident politician, and she is actually a member of Turkey's mainstream secular opposition party, which represents the second largest electorate in the country. So I believe in one of the recent elections, they received as much as 30% of the votes. And Jinan is the executive director of the Istanbul branch of this, opposition party called Cumhuriyet Halk Partisi, CHP. And Jinan was one of the politicians who really did her best to engineer a recent victory against Islamists in Istanbul. She was she was very dedicated. She has excellent management talents, and she also took a really strong stand against electoral fraud, because in some of the past elections, Islamists have been stealing votes because, they've been rigging the elections. So all of her advocacy was really important in that recent victory against Islamists in Istanbul, which is the fourth largest city in the world and also the largest city in Europe. So, it was a really, really major historic moment. Unfortunately, Islamists are very furious that they lost Istanbul, and they are blaming Jinan, for their defeat. And what they did was they've been digging up some of her old social media posts to find, whatever they can in order to instigate a witch hunt against Jinan so that they can avenge, their defeat in Istanbul, so to speak. So that's really the basis of the controversy. And the recent, there's a recent ruling from a lower Turkish court which sentenced her to 10 years in prison for, several thought crimes such as blasphemy against Islam, and things like that, insulting the president, which is shouldn't even be a crime anyway. And if the Court of Cassation, which is Turkey's Supreme Court of Appeals, upholds the verdict, then Jinan may actually have to end up serving time in prison, which of course is going to end up having an enormous chilling effect on the rights of religious minorities and dissidents worldwide.
Thank you, Kursat. Let me get a feel for what's happening in Turkey. For instance, I would wager that in Iran, I would say an overwhelming majority, I would guess, of people on the street would be, let's say you interview out of 100 people of Iranians on the street, I would say maybe 85% are against the regime. You might correct me. In Turkey, if you found 100 people just on the street in Turkey, in Istanbul, how many people are for Sharia law and for Islamists, and how many would be against?
So that's a good question. I believe there was a recent poll conducted in 2015, if I recall correctly. And according to that poll, 11% of Turks supported some kind of Islamic law. So I don't know if that's Sharia or not. So Turkey is actually one of the countries in the world where support for Islamic law remains, really, really low, despite more than a decade of Islamist rule. It actually used to be even lower. It was, I believe, 3% or something like that before Erdogan consolidated his regime. But at the same time, it's important to distinguish between, support for, hardcore Sharia as opposed to other forms of bigotry and religious fanaticism. So you may have people who say they do not support Sharia, but they may still support some of Erdogan's crackdowns and things like that.
Right. Okay. Well, look, there's it's tragic in a way, but this is how totalitarians rule, that the majority of people are against, but somehow these totalitarians are in power. Now, in your work, and at the article in Front Page Magazine that you recently had published, you document some of the statements Jinan has made on social media, etc. Very colorful, very brave. For instance, Jinan has said on Twitter that, quote, and I apologize, I know this is a family show, but we gotta at least be honest. Quote unquote, Jinan wrote on Twitter, "Men with small dicks want to build big mosques." Quite a brave thing to say in a Sharia environment. She has posted pictures of herself eating pork, which we know is forbidden in Islam. She has acknowledged the historical reality of the Armenian genocide, and she once wrote, quote, "Stop praying, Muslims. There is no room left in paradise," end of quote. This must really drive Islamists crazy.
Definitely, of course. Tolerance for dissent and tolerance for free speech is not really their forte. So, unfortunately, and they are really furious. As some of these tweets surfaced, they've been generating outrage. I know that conservative, like Islamist newspapers in the country have been targeting her. They've been engaging in harassment against this politician. Although it's also important to acknowledge that she did not really post these tweets in kind of like a major political context. They were more like, responses, conversations, and things like that. And they're also several years old. So it's really, Islamists who are kind of digging up these old tweets and, trying to bring that up at every opportunity. So they're just looking for an excuse.
And no freedom of speech, of course. And Jinan is facing 10 years in prison. Now, you've started some activism to try to defend her. You've started a petition. Tell our viewers about that so that they can support the petition and sign it.
So the petition is really, I guess, to express solidarity with Jinan. And it's also very important to acknowledge that if Jinan ends up serving, time in prison for her statements, that's going to have an enormous chilling effect worldwide. And there are several reasons for that. First of all, some of these, Islamist countries and administrations can actually compel major social media giants to, engage in censorship when it comes to Islam. So, and I sent you like 2 documents, a few hours ago. One of them was I tried to set up a birthday charity fundraiser for Jinan. And after several hours of contemplation, Facebook moderators actually did not allow me to post a birthday petition for Jinan's situation. And I also was locked out of Twitter for basically saying radical Islam is wrong. I've sent you those attachments. So that's the first, problem. And the second one is Turkey is under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Human Rights. So this will go to the Court of Cassations, and then it will most likely be appealed to the European Court of Human Rights. And then, if they lobby, if they pressure the European Court of Human Rights, and I know that they've done that recently, then the European Court of Human Rights may also be swayed, into publishing an opinion that might end up upholding the sentence or something like that. Because, their kind of like jurisprudence is very complicated. So it's ideally we should just make sure that the Court of Cassation dissolves the prison sentence. And if they abide by their own precedents, they should do that, because there was a case from 2015 when Fazıl Say, who is an international famous Turkish pianist, again made some colorful statements about Islam. He quoted a Persian poet from 11th century, Ömer Khayyam, who made some satirical verses about Islam, comparing the Islamic conception of paradise to a brothel. And he was actually acquitted. So there were charges, but they were eventually dismissed by the Court of Cassation. So if they comply with their own precedent, they should dismiss the charges against Jinan. But under the current environment, and Erdogan has become increasingly authoritarian and rogue, we do not really know if they will abide by their own precedent.
Right. Just so we can help and so people can help. Now, viewers, you can just Google Turkish dissident faces 10 years in prison. You can type in Canan, Jinan, that's how it's pronounced. And you can also Google with that Kursat, Kursat, and you will find the front page article that Kursat wrote on Jinan, and at the bottom you can sign a petition. So just Google Turkish Dissident faces 10 years in prison. That's the front page article at Front Page Magazine. And Google Jinan and Kursat and you will find it. Kursat, what are some other ways that they can contact you and also sign this petition?
They can contact me from my USC email. So it's my last name, Pekgoz @usc.edu. So if they want to reach out with any specific message, I will be more than happy to communicate with anyone. If you're an Islamist, please do not send me death threats. Okay, we are just like, just don't do that. But and if you can just post the petition around, like, you know, even on Facebook, just posting it on Twitter, that might sometimes create a cascade effect. Or if you can post it on forums, if you're like on your blog, anything like that, that ends up, you know, helping over the long term. When I first ran the petition, of course, like there were no signatures, and we already have, I think, something more than 300 signatures. So hopefully the more signatures there are, the more we'll be able to express our dissent. And it's really a fundamental liberties issue, because as I've tried to explain, this may end up having a chilling effect, not just in Turkey, but through the entire world when it comes to criticism of Islam. So it's not just, you know, Janan's personal liberty that is at stake, but it might also be your own future liberties as well. And I myself have been locked out of Twitter for saying radical Islam is wrong, and for posting that petition on my Facebook, which was denied by Facebook moderators. So big tech, you know, social media giants are already engaging in the censorship, and it may get worse and worse in the future if you do not take a stand.
Absolutely. And even here in the West, the elites are enabling the persecutors of Jinan. You're having difficulty even trying to stand up for this dissident. This is really scary times. Before we go, Kursat, what brings you to this battle? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I mean, I was raised by secular parents, so I think like perspectives like this are very common among Turkish dissidents and like members of the opposition. So, I mean, I don't know, I guess I was just kind of like born into that cultural struggle against Islamists. I myself was actively involved with certain kinds of activism when I was in Turkey. So I participated in protests against compulsory religious education. I worked as a pro bono teacher for CYDD, which is a secularist organization that especially tries to help girls and women from, you know, the rural parts of the country. I participated in the Gezi protests in 2013, which was kind of like a major rebellion against the Erdogan administration. So it's just part of the cultural environment that I grew up in. And yeah, I hope that answers the question. And it's natural, you know, you have to do it because your fundamental liberties are at stake.
Absolutely. Kursat, thank you for being such a brave and noble man, for standing up for these dissidents who are being persecuted. We really need voices like yours. And thank you for joining the Glazov Gang, and best of luck. Best of luck to you and for your battle for freedom and for persecuted people.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Glazov Gang viewers, please support Jinan. Just Google Jinan. Please get involved and look up Kursat's petition and take a stand. For all of you that like our show, please remember we are fan generated. Go to jamieglazov.com to support the show if you do support us, and make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel of the Glazov Gang. Good night.